things about growing up with a connection to Iran, however remote it might have been, was that I was always aware of my cousins in Iran. Every year, they would send us a Nowruz card, a Persian New Year card, in March 21st. And it was always a beautiful Persian miniature, sometimes illuminated with this sort of shiny metallic paint. Over the years, I began to write to my cousin, who's a couple years younger than me, and when she was arrested in high school, it was right after the 1979 revolution. She was in high school, and she was protesting the mandatory veiling law that was instituted in 1980, and she was in jail for 4 years, and it gave me an awareness of not just the politics between the United States and Iran, but also what was taking place in Iran. And it was a kind of window for me to connect to Iran in a more compassionate way, to understand that Iranians themselves were struggling, not just in this country, but also against a regime in Iran that was eroding some basic human rights. And I think one could say they still are doing it, especially since 2009. But one of the things that disturbed me after 9/11 was the wholesale view of the Muslim world and of Arabs and Iranians and anybody who could be conceivably thought of as a Muslim, including Sikhs, and the kind of level of hateful language towards people of the Middle East. But one of the most disturbing things was when George W. Bush gave his famous Axis of Evil speech in January 2002, in which he conflated Iraq, Cuba, North Korea, Iran, Somalia, as part of the axis of evil. And I thought about, what does language like that do to people's sensibilities? You know, how do they think about human beings when you hear people referring to whole countries and civilizations through that kind of language? So I wrote a poem called Axis of Evil. 1. Sohaila puts the samovar back on the crowded shelf, sips the last of her dark red tea. Her hands sweep across the sofre on the floor, gathering empty plates, littered with pistachio shells and sprigs of mint. Tonight they have declared war on Baghdad. She worries about her young son, her mother suffering from rheumatism. Upstairs, her husband listens to the radio, sometimes the BBC, sometimes Voice of America. But lately, it's the government station. When he hears the sound of the plaintive neigh, he turns the volume up, down when the mullahs address the nation. 2. In a quiet city in the Midwest, a woman opens her umbrella at the first sight of a last spring rain. Lately, she's been thinking about her safety. What will it take to drive back the forces of evil in her midst? She's thought more about the places and people on earth that live like she does, checking their watches, feeding their kids, dutifully paying their taxes. 3. All night, Mohamed hears the wail of sirens. In the morning, he watches angry men hoist long ropes and topple statues of the Great One. Let them erase this history, so long as he can go to school again, so long as the rain of bullets ceases. 4. Sohaila awakens to a glorious sunrise. How can she have turned in her bed so much and still feel so rested? Tehran is a lonely city, she thinks, gazing out her second-story window at the sad dirtiness enveloping her city. She thinks, too, of her deceased father's voice, his reminders to look always for goodness.